All right, so we're on now.
Yeah.
Correct? All right.
Whenever you're ready.
All right, welcome everybody to the Soulman Podcast episode. I don't know, and I don't care. I've totally lost track. So we actually have a couple of really cool things today that are totally unusual. We have one, Wade's not here, so if whoever's editing this rock through the cameras, Wade's not here. His mom is turning, is having a birthday. Yeah, I mean, that's a better way to say it.
Whatever number.
So happy birthday, Wade's mom.
Yes, happy
We'll eventually meet
birthday.
you someday. So have a great birthday. And so I have a guest host who, if anybody listens and watches, premiered today, which will not be today when you're watching it, but whatever, you understand. So Lisa County, who agreed randomly as I was watching it back, you actually agreed to be a guest host when I didn't even know I needed a guest host.
Oh, I don't remember that, but
Yeah.
okay.
So I was watching it back, and I'm like, well, maybe I'll call you to be a guest host. You're like, yeah, do that. So anyway, so we have a guest host because, one, I thought that you were more interesting than you gave yourself credit for last time. And number two, you have way more expertise in this field than I do. And without Wade here, I don't know what I'm doing. So we're going to hopefully, you're going to just back me up on whatever I screw up. Couple of thank yous really quick is these stickers from Pastel Pencil, Soulman Podcast stickers. This is actually yours. You get to have it.
All
It's
right.
really cool. Pastel Pencil, thank you very much for all the marketing needs. If you want to know, Pastel Pencil is a young female entrepreneur.
Excellent.
And she is providing us stickers for the Soulman Podcast because apparently we're cool enough to have stickers.
I'd have to agree.
Which, like, when I grew up, if you had stickers for whatever you were doing, like, you were cool.
Yeah.
So-
That's the kind of thing a band has.
Yeah, like a band, like
Yeah.
a real one. Like,
Band has
if you have a
stickers.
merch table, I don't
Yeah.
care how bad you are a real
You're
band.
legit.
So we have a cool guest today, which Lisa knows way better than I, so we'll figure out how that works. But we have Ryan Sturgis. Ryan, thank you very much for stopping by today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. This is really exciting.
So we had never met other than like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
We had a couple of people tell me that you would be good on the podcast.
Oh, good.
So there's other people that have confidence in you.
Well, I hope I live up to their.
Yeah, no pressure, right?
Yeah. I'll try to be interesting.
So you said you've listened to a couple podcasts before.
Yes.
The Soulman Podcast.
I would consider myself a fan at this point.
Wow, look at
I
that.
think it's great.
Okay, mark that. Make a mark on that. We got to make sure that
I highly recommend.
we have a fan. Well, so how we kind of start here is a little bit of your background. You're from Mankato originally?
No.
No,
actually.
okay.
I'm a
Well, then I'm totally
transplant.
wrong. Okay.
I'm a transplant.
So tell us a little bit about where you're from.
Sure. Yeah. Again, I was born and raised in New Hampshire.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Where in New Hampshire?
Well, I was born in Concord, New Hampshire, which is the capital.
Wade's been there for sure.
Wade's been everywhere. He has a
Everywhere.
story
Yes.
of all the places that everybody mentions. I feel
I
like
can't live up to that part of being Wade
he's-
today,
No.
but
he's
No.
well-traveled individual. I think I heard him talking about some wonky little town in Iowa.
Yeah.
On one, I think it was with Melissa Bradley. I was like,
Yeah.
how do you know this stuff? But yeah, so I was born in Concord, and raised in Bradford, New Hampshire. It's a really small little town.
So
I mean,
where is
raised in
that
the
like
woods.
geographically?
So it's central, south central Minnesota, or south central New Hampshire.
Okay.
And then I went to college up in the White Mountain region, where Mount Washington is, and a lot of people, more people know where that area is because it's a pretty epic part of the country.
Beautiful.
That White Mountain range. And
See, what college did you go to?
I went to Plymouth State. I started at Plymouth State College, and by the time I graduated from Plymouth State University because they evolved into a university. But it's really an awesome college up north in the White Mountain Range. I went to school for theater and music,
Okay.
and
Did you know you wanted to do that when you were in, say, high school, grade school-ish?
yeah, I got into theater in middle school. And I guess I did stuff when I was a kid, but it was kind of like, I also played t-ball and I did everything else, swimming and whatever. You just try everything when you're a kid. And I always loved it, but I actually got into it, for real in middle school. And it was a big part of my high school, experience was drama. It was an after school thing. I started out playing soccer my freshman year, and I don't know. It's just like the kids were mean, you know. It's like I love soccer. I played soccer my whole life, but like all of a sudden it was like this new arena, and like kids were just discouraging to you instead of encouraging. And I went to and I found theater, and I loved improv. I was always like a really ridiculous, devout fan of SNL.
Yeah.
So like that's really why I wanted to do theater, was because
Yeah.
of improv, and I got into it and I found an awesome group of friends, you know, a lot of friends who were older than I was. I make a joke. I went to 3 senior dances 3 years in a row and didn't end up going to my own.
Oh,
So I you know, I was hanging out with older girls is kind of a thing I've always done.
So you're married now?
I'm married
Is your
now.
wife older than you?
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
See, it's just
I
you
always
know,
did that as a kid. I always hung out with older kids.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is.
Yep,
Even
me
as a
too.
young kid, like my dad would tell me that, you know, hey, go play with Zach Murrah, who's Zach if you're watching. Hi. But
Zach.
go play with Zach Murrah. I'm like, no, he's our age. And I went and hung out with like the other kids that were 5 years older than I was or something
Yeah,
like
you can
that. I don't
gain
know
a
why
lot
that
just
was.
standing there and listening to the kids that are older than you.
Good and bad.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. But you know, it's definitely a little window into the wisdom of the world if you're hanging out with people who have had more experiences with you. I've always enjoyed that. So yeah, that was, you know, and then I was like, all right, I love this. I'm gonna do this for school. So I auditioned to get into the theater program at Plymouth State. And
Well, okay, hold on. So back up. So most people, we say this a lot, is they go through like the very first part of their like background in like lickety split.
zip through it. Right?
Zip through it.
We don't
so,
want to zip through it.
So go back. So you talk about improv. Theater is actually one thing that I would really like to try as an adult that I probably didn't have enough confidence as a kid to
Sure.
do, you know?
or
Yeah.
exposure to
Or
it.
exposure to. I don't know if it was what it was, but I've always told myself I really want to do a play sometime. Like
Yeah.
just not have it be my number one thing that I'll ever do, but just something to do. I talked to you about earlier the drama teacher,
Right.
my first semester of school, which that is a whole other story that I should tell at some point. Oh my gosh, it's amazing how my final in that class and how it turned out. I got an A plus, by the way.
All right.
Probably the only A pluses I had in college. But so, what about improv? Like, really drew you to that?
Well, you know, it's like it's like a challenge to push yourself to be really brave. You know, it was like it was super scary, and it still is. You know, theater and singing, which is another thing I've done a lot of, public singing, professional singing, and you know, it's frightening. There's no question about it. But I guess I really I really value that emotion or feeling, you know, just sort of being scared and doing it anyway. And it's something that I kind of got addicted to, you know, in a sense. Like, and the other cool thing about theater is that it's really collaborative, and you kind of you've got to pull your own weight, and you've got to not try and be the star every second, or it all falls apart, you know. And it's similar to certain team sports and things like that. So, and I love the camaraderie of it. I loved that. You know, it's a build up, it's an anticipation thing, and then you've got to go out there. You could learn your lines and spend all the time you want trying to prepare, but eventually you are out there, and you don't have anything to support you except for your own memory and your own guts, you know. And that's something I've always been drawn to, you know, that sort of emotional experience, I guess. And I also really love words and ideas, you know. I'm big into philosophy, and there's a lot of philosophy in theater. And there's, you know, theater is an interpretation of reality. And I'm a huge film fan, and we'll get into my obsession and love of film probably, but you know, and theater was a more immediate, you know, something similar or relatable to film, but something I could do at my high school.
Oh no, go ahead.
Sorry. Now, do you think that that's something that comes naturally, that acting ability, or is that something like that you had, you know, you learn the techniques? Or I've always wondered if it's like a sport where, you know, athletes are naturally inclined to certain things.
I would say that acting is different than being like a MVP basketball player or something. I believe anybody can be an actor, and I think we all act to a certain degree, right?
Okay,
We all
unpack
put
that.
on we all put on a persona. You act different in front of grandma than you do in front of your college buddy,
Yeah.
Right.
So there's all there's parts of acting that we all do, and so I truly believe that anybody can be an actor. Obviously, like anything, there's a skill set that if you understand, you'll be better at it. If you understand what projection is, and pointing out into the audience, and you have a good sense of blocking. If you're good at like, I guess, interpreting a script, and script analysis, then you'll have a better sense of how to play your character. Those things you could learn, and that's what I was taught in school. I think that there's a spectrum of personality types, right? And certain people are outgoing, and I have that. I'm one of those weird, like, super introverted extroverts where if given the choice, I'm quietly sitting by myself and reading a book or something is honestly like where I want to be. But I also, I love people, and I have that sort of extroverted thing going on. So I think that's a good combination if, to go into acting, because you kind of have like a little bit of a pre-makeup for it. But I truly believe that anybody who's like, I want to do this, I want to do this well, I think you can,
I find that so interesting. I've always thought of myself as I feel like I'm an introverted person, but I really like people. And when you said you're an introverted extrovert, like, I've never heard it said like that. And I don't know if I've had a moment on the podcast that I'm like that. Like, I cannot tell you how much I relate to that.
Yeah.
Because my whole thing, like, I tell my wife when I go fishing, and I love to musky fish.
Yep.
So musky fishing is like 12 hours of nothing, and then you have 3 minutes of like the greatest thing ever.
Right.
But it's like the meditation of just like casting and being by yourself and like self-reflecting and looking at the world and just noticing what's going on around you and nature and all this stuff and being quiet. Like, there's been on trips I'll be on by myself with just me and my dog, or just me, and I'll be quiet in the boat for 12 hours, not say a single word for 12 hours, and I had the greatest time ever. I didn't catch a fish. I had no idea, but I had a great time.
I love that too. Being, solidarity in nature is one of the best states you can be in if you're really in the moment.
Yes.
I know, like I said, I grew up in New Hampshire, so I grew up in the woods. So, being alone in the woods, man, there's
And
really
how
nothing.
quiet it is.
And just,
But then I could also go to a hockey game, which, let's say, go Bulldogs and Mavericks, both. We got to say that.
Thank you.
We got to make sure.
That's very manipulative.
Yeah, I got to say. So just if
Had
you
I
can't
known you were wearing that, I would have sported my Mav gear.
Then we would have
So I didn't tell you because I wanted to be the one that looked like the bigger fan.
There you
Yeah.
go.
But-
Well done.
But I could also go to a Bulldog game with 7,000 other people,
Right.
and hug every one of them. I mean, it just.
Yep.
So anyway, sorry, that's a total side note.
No,
but
I
love
think
that
people. I
explanation.
think probably more people feel that way than realize. Yeah.
And having those times by yourself, and just like, you learn who you are. I
Yeah.
think a lot when you just can sit down, be quiet, notice what's going on around you, and I don't know. I just find that's a really interesting state. That with our busy lives, maybe not as busy right now. Maybe we've had more self-reflection in the last year than maybe we wanted.
I think so. Yeah.
But man, you can't beat that.
Yep.
Anyway, sorry. Super
No, not at
sidetracked.
all. No, it's. I think that's. It's definitely been an interesting balance for me. Because I really do love. I love being on stage. I love doing. What you guys do as well, interviewing people and really connecting with people. I mean, that's a big part of what I do in my career. I love. I love being part of a film set with a whole group of people. We're all working towards the same thing. Same thing with theater. Anything like that. I really, really love it. When it comes down to small talk or like elbow rubbing or any of that stuff, I'm like, give me the woods, baby. So
Right.
yeah. So, I to sort of wrap up your question about why theater, I think it's a combination of things. I think
More why improv? Like,
Sure.
Because
Yep.
I'm not a big theater person, but explain to me, like, there's different types of theater. Improv is a genre, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So, improvisation usually is comedy, and it's something where, you're given a parameter, and then you've got to make something worthwhile to watch or see or listen to out of nothing, and you don't have any pre-planning, and it's a lot like doing an interview, frankly. If you do a good interview, unless you're just asking the questions written on the page, but if you do an interview where you're going to get something magical out of somebody, what you do is you sit and you listen, and then you respond, and that's really what improv is. And understanding that you don't say no to somebody's idea, you say yes and, right? You don't say, somebody comes in the room and says, "Oh my gosh, I just saw an elephant outside my window." You don't go, "No, it was a lion." You go, "Yes, and that elephant was wearing a hat." Just to give an example. And that is a really cool experience. I mean, you got to think on your toes. It's fast. I really haven't done it in years, frankly. One of the things I have done more recently with theater is Shakespeare, which is another thing that I love to do. But, for the last several years, my world has been more in film than in theater. But, yeah, that was an exhilarating thing to take on.
Yeah.
Is I guess how I would best say, why I wanted to do it, because it's like a challenge to yourself. Can you take nothing, can you take nothing and turn it into something that people will then be, excited about?
Did you spend time doing any philosophy study in college at all?
I did, yeah. And I took several classes in philosophy that were electives that matched my degree. And then ever since then, I have been just a philosophy reader, just an unofficial student of philosophy, and honestly, more in the last 12 months than ever have I really been just sort of almost like up to here with it, just because it's a very confusing time, it's like really interesting stuff going on in my mind and my heart, that I was like, I'm gonna try to take this time to sort of figure out, who do I want to be moving on from here. It's like this is like a sort of a forced transitional period, and for me, like, I was doing a lot of stuff that stopped immediately when COVID hit. And so I was like, whoa, this is a trippy thing. Like, this is whacked. And so I, as I have several other times throughout my life, turned to philosophy to try to figure myself out, I guess.
Isn't it fun? I was a history and philosophy student up at UMD.
Awesome.
Yep. So I live in the world of gray. My whole, like, my wife's a labor and delivery nurse. Everything is black and white.
Right.
It's 5 milliliters or 5 mils or whatever, not 5.5. Sure. 5.5 kills you. 5 will make everything right.
Right. Yeah. So, talk about black and white.
Yeah, it's so unusual sometimes, but I love, like, you talk about just thinking about ideas, or thinking, like, you hear someone. I'll often listen to, like, even politically, or like whether it's raising kids or like any of this stuff. I often will listen to. If someone has the opposite view of me, what do they say? And then I'll listen to it, not because I'm necessarily going to agree with all of it, but I might think, you know what? I didn't think about it like that. And I think that's super fun. And I think it's something that not many people do, especially today.
Right now.
Yeah.
That's, I'd say, one of our biggest downfalls as a society right now, is being incapable of doing that. Not willing to do it. You know?
It's. I think it's so hard when someone else is doing something for a reason. Oftentimes, some people are completely irrational, illogical, and just do whatever and whatever.
Sure.
But people are doing things for a reason. So, to me, I love learning about, even if I totally think it's ridiculous, learning about how'd you get to that part, because I didn't get there, but how'd you get there with that?
Yeah.
And to me, I have a client who thinks absolutely the opposite politically that I do. I mean, about as opposite. But we still get along because we're both at trying to figure out, like, she'll say something, I say something, and we both completely disagree with each other. At the end of the phone call, we're like, well, I respect that you at least, are trying to be a good person, and you might think differently than I do. okay, but that's all right. And then we move forward. And I think that's so much fun to do. And we we do very little. Just like we were talking on your episode, Lisa, about the, people, whether it's media or whether it's
Well, because the media, like we were just talking about, it was so black and white. But maybe if there were more of that, giving the reasons behind the facts that we're spewing out to people, maybe that would help with understanding. Because the news has not been a lot of people's friend this past year, and that's talk about going to nature. Even I, after work, will have to just go and get away from it all because otherwise, it's just too much and none of it good. It really gets to you. So.
Does that affect you as a person that talks about the news every day and deals in that realm? Does it affect you when it's largely negative?
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure it does. Yeah. So this last year has probably been the most impacted I've been in my career by world events. Now, previously, like if something happened that I had a friend whose son was killed in a car accident, and that was hard to go report on that,
Sure.
Which obviously was much worse than the past year. But it's hard.
So when you say that it was the most, it was affecting you the most, can you give an example of what that would look like?
Well, yeah, and another example is the newsroom is completely shut down right now. So there's always one, maybe two people in there at a time. So you don't even have other people to bounce stuff off of. So, you get the news, you're reporting the news and delivering the news, and there's no one else there to, to help you process it. Yeah. So, and people don't like what you're saying, no matter what you're saying, there's some side that's not going to like it. So you have to hear it from them, and just very little positive.
So just in case your bra strap is showing for the entire take, there's no one there to tell you that it's showing. No. Which for anybody on a previous episode, she said that's not me being weird. She brought that up, so I apologize. As I was saying that, I'm like, this is really going to be awkward. So watch the Lisa episode, and then you'll understand.
Tune in. Inside jokes, but yeah.
Again, it's all context. It's not the soundbite. It's all a context.
Well,
right.
Yes. My gosh, and that's hard. It's hard to get to the point where you can convey the context. And I have such a mixed bag of feelings about news and media right now. Understanding media, I'm an expert at this point in what you can do to people's minds and hearts with video and understanding that and knowing the power behind it and knowing that this is a mirror of ourselves that's being projected back on us and really, defining us in a lot of ways. I feel very bad for the media in some sense over the past several years and the job that they've had to do, under such scrutiny. And at the very same time, I'm like, you guys are ruining things.
Right.
It's like if you could just figure out how to not be so black and white, or to not be so, after that's like sort of bottom denominator emotional experience.
Right. The most dramatic.
We could get,
right.
I'm primarily talking about, national news outlets that. Really that their purpose is to get that advertising dollar, right? And we're in such a place, and I have such a mixed feeling about, whose responsibility that is. It's a tough one. It certainly does get you down watching the news, and how much of it is, how much of it is it under their control, out of their control, and how much of it is it that we are just in a new place that we need to learn how to deal with this in a new way, and we just haven't had the chance.
It is, and you two obviously know media way better than I do, so I'll pose a question for you two: is media in the national sense, is that a dying medium?
In the traditional sense, I think so.
In the traditional sense,
like in the broadcast sense, I would say it's under. It's under an offensive. At this point, I would say it's definitely. It's going to have to evolve. And I think that, if you think about the difference between like cable and streaming right now, that's a good example of evolving to the audience, because it's all about the audience. The advertising dollars is about the audience. It's all about the consumption of the mass population, right? And so when those trends change, you've got to adjust, and usually you're several steps behind. And so I think that I think
the larger the entity, the farther they are behind. 'Cause it
Absolutely.
takes that much longer for them to realize what in the world's actually going on.
absolutely, no question about it.
And I think what's interesting is not interesting. It's actually sad. Is when you have people that will just regurgitate whatever they hear on the news, and then it's fact, it's this, it's that. It's like, well, did you hear? And I'm like, that like, do you have any idea? Like, there's so much more to
Right.
that. If that's true, there's got to be so much more to this. Like,
Yep.
why not? Doesn't that? Do you see that? Doesn't that pop a thought in your head? Like, that seems so ridiculous. How can that be so black and white on such a gray issue?
Right.
You know, Iran does this, or Syria does that, or Biden or Trump does this. It's like there was probably some other stuff that went on before or after that, no matter who it was or what political persuasion.
right.
Like, how about you just
Probably
take
some
a
other
second?
stuff.
Yeah.
It's no different than. This is a small thing, but it's no different than like the bra strap joke, right?
Right.
Like someone could take that and be like, "Look, he's saying weird things," which that was
Right.
probably weird, but we might edit that out. But the point was, that's a joke between you and I from our previous episode.
Right.
That
Right. If you
didn't-
hopefully you don't
There's
feel
context.
offended by.
No, no,
And
no,
if you
no.
did, then tell me and I'll stop
No,
saying goofy things.
I
But,
brought it up the first time, so yeah.
like, someone could take that and make it into some weird thing.
And the crazy thing is that the fact is, false information travels way faster than real information because it's more interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
there's
Right.
statistics out there. A fake news story on Twitter travels 6 times faster than a real one because it's interesting.
'Cause it's-
Because reality's not as interesting as what we can imagine, you know.
Yeah.
And this is something that I've just been thinking a lot about, being home and doing mostly editing work for the last 12 months, and hanging out with my third grader. But this idea that how we've got to this place where so much information is misinformation, and how significant the actions being taken based on that information is affecting who and what we are. It's remarkable.
Yeah, it is. How do you find out what is and isn't? That's the other part.
I don't know the answer to that
Right.
right now. I don't know. And this whole thing where I don't want to get too political, we're not into that, but like this whole idea of canceling people because of a set of information that you've heard is so dangerous right now, because we just don't have a foundation for verifying that information, and it's become very emotional, and we're inundated with information that claims to be, some from some position of authority that suggests fact, and plenty of it isn't at all, because that travels so fast and everybody's interested, and the stuff that has another side to it, or has more to it than like
And
what you were
even
just saying.
even the stuff that is fact, it's how it's being worded. It's
Yep.
how it's like, because you need the clickbait. You need the
Yep.
the 6 things that went wrong today. It's
Right.
like, well, were they
Right.
really wrong? Were they that bad? Like, what was actually
that's what
actually
sells.
happened?
Right,
You
right.
know?
Yep.
It's no different than the marketing that any business does. Mine, anybody else's. It's like, that's what gets people's attention, so that's what you turn to.
Yep.
Which is fortunate or unfortunate, I don't know. But the cancel culture thing I find is really interesting. And here's my whole thought on it, again, without being super political. But my thought on it is like, if there's someone with a really crappy idea, as an example, like, and I get offensive, whatever. But let's say it's a really crappy idea. I would actually rather it be out there for everyone to figure out that it's a crappy idea.
That's it.
Is that
And
a
that's what we're
bad- is
supposed
that a
to
bad
do here.
thought?
I think that's great. I think just because somebody's bad idea offends you does not mean that it should be stricken from the record. Because otherwise we're not going to know,
Yes.
what bad ideas are out there.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Or you strip all the bad ideas out, and then someone comes along with that same idea, and we don't have the context to know, hey, guess what that
Yeah.
led to last time?
Like
Ah,
2
right.
weeks later, maybe, because of our attention span.
Right.
Is so short.
no,
That
4
can
days.
happen.
Yeah,
Right. 4 days.
later.
4 hours.
4 hours.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that that scares me.
It's scary. There are people out there really at risk, for dangerous stuff. It's just it's
And
tough.
two, I think what's even okay. You look at there are politicians, and some are in there for the right reasons, some are in there for not the right reasons, and whatever. I won't get into that. But you look at, say, good people that are trying to make a difference are not going to get into that chair because their lives are going to be totally ripped apart.
Right.
Where you have someone that just doesn't care,
Right.
they're going to go after it because they don't have the wholesome reasoning or reasons for being there, if that's a weird
Absolutely.
Minnesotan way
Right.
of saying it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, and it's important to say that the process of, addressing offensive behavior or offensive language even is important, and to stand by people who are being oppressed in one way or another. That process is important. It's, I think, and it's such a tough thing because you don't want to go and say that none of this is valid, because a lot of it is valid. The hard thing is that we need to, since we're airing these grievances, which is important because there are people out there that are treated unfairly and they have disadvantages, and that needs to be worked on. Every social problem we've ever had in this country, we end up finding a due process. We've got to keep moving towards it. We've got to value people's grievances, and we've got to value people's concerns about equality, and continue pushing ourselves in a direction where people are treated equally no matter what. And sort of blatantly, without a system, canceling somebody for one thing that they said that might affect that person in a negative way ends up being a detriment to that process, I believe, because ultimately, then you've got people who are willing to say, oh, they're just canceling everybody. And, we got dangerous people who want to use that as an excuse to do bad things, and it's a tough one. It really is. But, I'm behind everybody who needs, the world to hear that they have had unfair treatment or whatever it is. And we just got to keep working together to try and hear the reasons why. Hear that before, hear the after, get the context, and be open to how to get there together. That requires listening, and you can't listen to someone if you've canceled them,
Or you're shouting over them.
Or you're shouting over them, yeah.
Now, see, this passion that you're bringing to this conversation is one of the things that makes you so great, Ryan, and all the things that you do. And we should get back to, some of the, things that you bring your passion to Mankato for, like filmmaking is how we first kind of got connected and with True Facade. So,
Sure.
So how'd you make that transition from theater to behind the camera?
Yeah, so I've always been in love with films. I was one of those kids, when I'd rent a movie, I would watch it at night and then I'd watch it again in the morning, no matter what, just to see really what the film ended up being, if you dove into it. And so I've always been a huge fan of films. I love classic movies. I love all movies. And theater was what I was doing. It was what I could do at school, and then it's also a huge passion, and I love it. It's a different thing. In a lot of ways, they're similar. But I've always known that I wanted to, produce content that mattered to people and intrigue them, or perhaps allowed them to think about a situation in a different way. And films have been so transformative for me. We were talking about philosophy earlier. There's a lot of great philosophy in film. And so I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to figure out how to be a filmmaker. I don't have an uncle in LA, and I don't have all the money in the world to just start producing these films. Films cost a lot of money. So for me, it was about starting a step-by-step process, trying not to make it just a means to an end experience, because if you do that, you don't really pay attention to your performance in whatever you're doing now. But there was a little bit of it to that. And so I decided to start a video production company, which I started here in Mankato. My wife, who teaches theater, got a professorship at MSU, which is why we came here from New Hampshire.
From New Hampshire, okay.
Yep.
So what year about was this?
That was 2007.
Oh, okay.
So we've been here for a long time now.
Yeah.
And the first job I got was working at St. Peter Public Access TV, and that was really a fun, it was a fun video job. And I loved St. Peter, and I love the people over there. And, then that crash happened, and they had to completely cancel the entire or the whole program, sadly. And so I went to school for a little while, MSU, for for a music degree, a master's in music, another passion of mine. And then we had our daughter, and I had started this video production company. It had actually started to take off. Business and entrepreneurship was never something that I knew I wanted to do. That was not a go get it kind of scenario. But at the same time, I'm a pretty independent person, and the creativity behind entrepreneurship was very attractive to me. And so, with the help of like the Small Business Development Center, I figured out how to start an LLC, and I started producing videos for companies in the area. I started, with small companies like Sun Moon Yoga. I made the very first video that was ever made for the Bent River Outfitters,
Cool.
And I did the city art, the sculpture tour. And what's really cool is I'm working now on a 10-year anniversary for those guys, a project with that, which is really cool. And I just still loved it, and it turned out that something that I feel like I was meant to do was interview people. And I just loved that process. And that was a huge part of what I was doing with video marketing. And I just wanted it to be authentic, wanted it to be story-based. I wanted it to bring something new to the table. And, as I went, I learned what looks good, what sounds good, how to shoot this stuff, how to edit, what editing software, all of that, which is a really fun part of entrepreneurship, which is you just got to learn as you go. The way I figured I'm getting paid to learn this stuff, then I'm in a good position. And, I got a chance to do like commercials. I got a job with Snell, to produce 5, 30-second car commercials. That was awesome, because then we were working with like scripts and actors and things like that. And that was more like, that was like a film set in a lot of ways.
So that like the commercials like come down to Snell for your next vehicle, like that type of thing?
Well, we actually brought a different angle to the whole like local car commercial thing, where we were not going to do that. What we were going to do is, try to create like a national level feeling to a commercial. So, we did this series of commercials that didn't have anything to do with that. Like it was the first one, it was like one car drove, down the road and landed in front of the bagel shop. And the guy coming out of the bagel shop looked at this dude in the car and went, "Snell?" And then that guy was like, "Snell." And then he drove off and found another car, "Snell? Snell." And it was just, I got to write the script and do the creative. And Todd Snell was awesome. And I went into his office and pitched this idea to him and Melissa. And at the time, the marketing director at the time, named Ann. And it was really fun. And it was not, it's not like I grew up saying, I'm going to make car commercials, but I loved all of it. I loved all of the stuff that I got to do here in Mankato, because for me, it was all about exploring something new, trying something new, challenging myself, challenging the group of people I was working with. Ended up at a point where we had some MSU interns with us and trying to mentorship, My really, really great friend Michael was a partner with me on all this stuff. And at the same time, we were doing a lot of like nonprofit organizations. We would do interview-based marketing for them, where, you interview the people who run the organization, and then you interview the people who benefit from the organization, and then they use that video to like get a new grant or continue a grant or whatever like that. And we still do this, around here a lot. And, for several years, it was just trying to build up, a reputation and continue to produce content that, was of extra value, try to make it so that whoever was going to buy our service was going to be pleasantly surprised, just sort of exceed the expectation was the mantra. It's been a wonderful experience. This town is remarkable when it comes to supporting each other economically. I can't think of a better place for me to have spread my wings in that area. And then, obviously, just like anything, there's certain competition starts to come, and, you got to evolve to that a little bit. But at the same time, for me, I always wanted to just sort of Hail Mary it up to the next thing, what it was going to be the next thing. And I ended up, finding a way to kind of get into a different space with my work, and started going to on a more national level with my content, and started inching my way towards documentary films, and trying to keep myself in the type of content that was really passionate for me, which, music is one of my biggest passions. And, in the last several years, I've been lucky enough to get to that point and start working in the music industry on a national level, and working on some films. So
I want to touch on something really quick.
Yeah.
Is you said a couple of things that I think really resonated with me when you're talking about being an entrepreneur. I'm a history and philosophy kid. I mean, I'd never thought I'd be an entrepreneur, but it's funny how you find yourself in that space.
Yeah.
When you're kind of independent minded, you know what you want to create. And then the other thing was being creative.
Yeah.
And I think this is, I'm not that old, I'm 34, but I feel like when I was in high school, and like even until maybe really 30 years old, I felt like creative was not like a cool thing.
Right.
It's like, but now people ask me like, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a creator. And they're like, what does that mean? Like, I might own like a wealth management and financial planning business, but all I'm doing is I'm creating things doing that. And I'm solving problems, and I'm helping people. It's one-on-one. Like you're talking about interviewing. Like, I love to interview people. One of the reasons we did the podcast, in my meetings, I'm interviewing them.
Absolutely.
I'm asking, okay, what matters to you? What doesn't matter to you? What do you like? What do you not like? All these different things. Anyway, but the point of why I'm saying this is because, like, maybe there's somebody watching, maybe there isn't, I don't know, but like having that creative idea and doing something with it, whether you fail or not. I mean, there's plenty of times that I failed, like falling on my face hard, totally sucked, but I learned a ton.
Right.
Yep.
And we had talked about some of the stuff, Lisa, when you'd go on air and fall on your face. And I'm sure there's probably times you're just like, you drive home and you're just like, that was a day that I
Failure of a
don't
day.
want to do
Yep.
again.
Absolutely.
But
It's the best way to learn.
the coolest part about hearing about what you're saying is, one, that you're a doer. You just did. Like you're talking the whole like entrepreneurial mindset. Go for the home run, just figure it out, go after it, learn. My buddy calls it walking prepared. Like you're never over prepared, you're always walking prepared. You're just like trying to get there. You might not be the most prepared person on the planet, but when you're in the room and it matters, you've got it because you've done it.
It's a lot like improv.
Yes,
I mean,
yes, that's a great.
it
that
really
makes
is.
a lot of sense
Because you have to be prepared enough to react appropriately, but you also need to react specifically.
Yes.
And you cannot prepare for that.
Yes.
Whatever the situation is in the moment, you cannot prepare for it. You can prepare yourself with a skill set to react to it, but you're never going to know exactly what's coming around the corner. And that combination of, being willing to not know, and being prepared enough to handle whatever's going to come at you that you don't know is coming, is totally what entrepreneurship is about.
It's fun.
It is. It's very invigorating.
It is, and
it can be tough.
It really sucks when it sucks, but it is really amazing when it's amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, because you found a problem, solved a problem, or something came up, and you're just like banging your head against the wall, like how is this going to work? And you figured out a way. Like that is what's so invigorating and so empowering about entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
And even if you totally fail, it's like whatever. Then you just move on to the next thing and you figure it out.
It's not a wasted thing, you
No.
know. I mean, like you said a minute ago, that's best how you learn, and that's really true. I think you can learn a lot from your successes, but
Way
not
more
as
from
much
failure.
from your failures.
Yeah, way more from failures where you learn.
Yep.
Success breeds failure, in my opinion. Too much success breeds failure.
Yeah, life balances itself out for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a sine curve to everything. When you're up, it's never as good as you think. When you're down, it's never as bad as you feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I had to just say that because like I said, we've never met, but I want to go have another beer after this. Hang out.
Yeah, I feel like you two were meant to meet for sure. So, yeah.
I'm totally
it's
taking
great.
all the time from the co-host over here,
No.
the guest host.
But we need to mention, Ryan's not really talking about how cool he really is. Did you know he was in Rolling Stone magazine?
I this is the only one podcast that I actually did some research for, and I did know that. The Rolling Stone gig.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
That was exciting. It really was. I mean, especially considering the circumstances, which was that everything had stopped, really. Just to tell that story, I was doing a lot of travel for work and was in L.A. and New York and Nashville for 3 years running. We was out on the road interviewing amazing musicians. It was a really fantastic experience. And when last year March hit, it was like the brakes went on so hard. There was that sound and that smell that brakes make when you push them too hard. Is what it felt like. But I was super fortunate enough to have had a chance to make a relationship with a band. They're called the Empty Hearts, and they're like this awesome super group. It's the guitarist from the Cars, the drummer from Blondie, the lead singer from the Romantics, What I Like About You, that guy, and the bassist from a band called the Chesterfield Kings.
Is Rick Springfield a part of the band?
He didn't make the cut.
Okay, well then it doesn't matter.
I know about her. I know about her love for Rick Springfield.
I learned all about it. I didn't know anything about it, but now I know.
One of the greatest Rick Springfield fans in the world, right here with us.
And got to interview him. So
Yes.
go back, watch the episode prior, whatever it was, and we actually watched it on here. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I had worked with them a couple times. We produced a music video for them, and we actually had produced 2 music videos for them. And so they had the reason that we worked with them is because that they had an album, a new album, their second album as a group, was being released in April or what, it was, or actually, no, I'm wrong. It was going to be released in June or July. So they were preparing for the release. What a band usually does now, which you basically have to do, back in the day in the music industry, you would go on tour to promote your album that people would buy. Nowadays, the industry has changed so much that it's literally the opposite, which is that you put out an album to promote your tour schedule, because that's the only way musicians make money these days.
Sure.
Is literally by going out and having thousands of people right next to each other screaming and spitting on each other. So the music industry has been in a total upheaval with this whole thing, and so their album they weren't able to go tour this album. So they called me because they wanted to do a series of music videos to put it out there and just sort of have another way to get the music to the fans. And the first song, well, we talked a lot about it, and the band is under a label called Wicked Cool Records, and that is owned and operated by Little Steven Van Zandt, who was in Bruce Springsteen's E Street Band, but you also might know him from The Sopranos. Silvio Dante from The Sopranos. He also had that Netflix show called Lilyhammer, and he has this radio show called Underground Garage, and he has this label, and he's like known in the industry as one of the most devout, producers of great music and understands classic rock, and he's just a really cool guy in the industry. And he was in charge of this album because it was through his label, and he named that band the Empty Hearts. And they talked a lot about what to put out, and he sort of said, well, this song, that the album's called Second Album. It's very creative, but there were several songs that they wanted to do videos for, and they needed to sort of decide what it was going to how they were going to roll it out. And so the album, the song that they wanted to put out first was this song called The World Has Gone Insane. And it's a really awesome song by an awesome band, and it's talking about how just crazy everything feels. And, they're a thoughtful band, and their lyrics are really, I think, it's crazy because this band, if this album came out in 1980 or 1970 or 60 or whatever, it would have just been, they would have been huge. But the music industry is really different these days, and you have to like already be at a certain, relationship with a certain label in order to do anything really. But this song, "The World Has Gone Insane," was the one that they decided to kick out first, and they gave me like a ridiculous amount of creative control over this idea. They said, listen to the lyrics and just tell us what you think. And so I was able to, it was such an awesome process because honestly, like I had not done anything up to this point really, except for just be there for my family, which has been amazing. But, it's very different than the creative place I was at for a while. And so I get to listen to this song and just sort of like imagine what this video could be like, and I started making notes and coming up with images that I think would fit the lyrics, and it was just a super organic process that I had a strange amount of creative control over just because of the circumstances, and I was able to get all this source content because of how much of a Wild West world the YouTube, so all of these sort of things that were just like came together, and not to mention, like the content of the song. And so I was able to, while hanging out with my kid and doing third grade from the kitchen table and, just hanging out at home, produce this music video. And it was such an organic experience. And I felt really lucky that under those circumstances, Rolling Stone picked it up and did an article on it and talked about the concept behind the video, and they were obviously doing a promotion of the band for the album, and to have it reach that audience, that music, that top of the music fandom audience was super cool.
Yeah.
It was, and it's not, I didn't get paid a ton for this project, it was just, but which that doesn't matter. Yeah. But it wasn't something that I had planned on doing or tried to do. It was just this really awesome organic experience, and it was really cool to reach that audience with it. And it's something I think I'll be proud of for a long time, not just because it got into a magazine, but because it was something that really was. It ended up being something that mattered a lot to me. The content and the imagery of this song was, at the time, kind of a lot what I was thinking about, and so it was pretty great. I felt very lucky to have had that chance to do that, and it's really amazing. Like I've been able to see inside the worlds of some of our most famous musicians in our culture, and the greatest thing that I've learned by interviewing these people is that the ones who truly love what they do and they're reacting to themselves humbly, honestly, without a ton of ego, these are the ones that are still out there doing it. And I've met a couple, that are more about their image and more about what their fans think of them, and they tend to be, sadder and not, quite capable of great work. And everybody in the band, the Empty Hearts, is like really this super down-to-earth, soulful person who really just loves music, and that's why they made this band. They've been through incredibly successful bands, and they've been on that side of, image and rock and roll and the whole thing. Now they're doing this for just the love of, putting notes together, writing lyrics, being in a room and collaborating and creating.
Being creative, yeah.
Creating. So it's been a cool experience. I've learned a ton just seeing how these certain people who are so successful have gotten there through just being honest with themselves and humble and caring and loving what they do versus caring what people think, So it's interesting. It's not exactly what I anticipated, If I were to view into that world, you'd think a lot more of it would be sort of egoic, but
Like Spinal Tap.
Yes,
To bring up another interview.
Yes.
like Spinal Tap. Oh my God.
I went and watched that movie when I was going through like the interview list of like, because I literally went on Wikipedia and just started like looking at all this stuff, Ryan Sturgis, all this stuff, and I saw some of the Spinal Tap, which I can't even remember the guy's name from.
His character's name is Derek Smalls.
Yeah.
And the actor is Harry Shearer.
I went back and I watched Spinal Tap after that because I'm like,
good.
like it's not a movie I forgot. It was just I hadn't thought about it in a while.
Yeah,
so I went
right.
back and like it was just as fun. It was probably funnier this time than it had been in a long time.
You probably
It's like,
understand certain things.
Oh,
that
Yeah.
it was so good.
it's so brilliant.
It's
And
it's so amazing. Anyway, sorry, we were on a really like a good, very serious point there. And then I just decided to throw in some.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did. I mean, and there's another example of somebody who's that man, Harry Shearer, and his wife, Judith Owen. They just play. They play. They're like, let's go play, make believe, you know. And he's out there right now, doing the Derek Smalls thing, and he's directing his own music video. There's Harry Shearer behind the camera, and then he turns around and he's Derek Smalls in front of the camera, and like yet another example of someone who's super famous. I mean, he's like every other voice on The Simpsons, you know, and could easily be precious and annoying, right? Because he's got prestige or whatever. And he's the opposite. And he's just, I'm like, I want to be this guy when I grow up, which is to continue to just do what you love and try to find fun ways to be creative and enjoy your life. And, you know, I think a certain amount of success allows you to get there. Whereas if you haven't had what you think you should have earned or something, you know, you might have more to prove. You know, it's just been so cool for me to experience that persona from all of these people. And I feel like that's the most valuable thing that I've gotten out of my experience in the music industry, is just seeing which ones, you know, which of these people are just totally authentic.
Authenticity.
Yeah.
Isn't it so amazing how there's such a lack of authenticity?
I think we might be like learning something about this in our
agree.
culture right now.
I agree.
You know, and I feel like maybe some of the experiences we've had over the past several years, including COVID, and I don't know, I feel like I'm really hoping that as a culture, as a society, we're starting to learn something more about the value of authenticity and sort of the empty promises of image.
Yep.
You know, and I've been thinking about it a lot, and you know, trying to find, you know, my way to, like, being happy that I was able to be connected with famous people, that people love their music and stuff, but like really can focus on the human aspect of it. And that's what I try to do every time I sat down to interview one of these guys who are super successful, is not think of them as something other than a person. And here, like, one of the first things I did every time I interviewed these guys was ask them who in their life got them into music, and not, you know, what famous guitarists did you listen to, which we get to that point, you know, and we start to understand how much other musicians influence each other. But who in your life, you know, was it your uncle? Was it your dad? And that, starting with that question, allowed the process to continue in an authentic manner, and just sort of trying to connect with them, you know, on that human level. And that's something I've loved about my work, regardless of who I'm interviewing, you know, whether it's somebody that, you know, works at Vine Thrift, or, you know, somebody who runs a car dealership, or whoever, you know, whatever it is, we all have our own human passions, and some of those passions have to do with what we do for business, but some of them just, you know, are about, I don't know, our favorite person that we grew up with, you know, and that's who shapes us, you know, and that kind of thing. So,
Isn't that funny though? How, and Lisa, chime in here because you're the guest host and you need to chime in because you're the better interviewer. But isn't that weird? Like, it's funny. Like, celebrity is such a weird thing. It's such a weird thing. It's almost to the point where people don't even look at them as real people.
yeah.
Like, I remember the first time I ever saw Tiger Woods in person. I'm like probably 21 years old, and I'm on spring break, and I'm with one of my best buddies, Ryan, and we walk up to this hole, and all of a sudden, like, this guy pulls this, the rope across. And we're like, we just got to this golf tournament. We don't know what we're doing, right? We first grabbed a beer, because that's what you normally do when you're 21 and you're on spring break. We run up there, and all of a sudden this guy brings a rope right in front of us. So the rope is on right in front of me, and Tiger Woods walks you to me away.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at him, like, walking by, and I'm like, holy shit, you are real.
Right.
Like, you are a real person.
Yeah.
Like, you do exist.
Yep.
I've only played you on video games. Like,
Right, I've seen you so many times two-dimensionally
Yes.
that it's
Yeah.
hard for me to even fathom that you're a real human being.
it was so odd. It was this weird thing in my head that, like, turned on.
Yep.
It was like, holy crap, like, that is really what we actually see of what these people look like and what they are and all that. And then you actually see him as a 3D human being that,
Yep.
if I wanted to, would have gotten in a lot of trouble, but, like, reached out and touched his elbow.
Yep.
I find that so interesting how, like, these are all real people. They have positives, negatives. They have personalities. They have, like you were talking about the band, Rick Springfield's band.
Yeah.
How those backstage they're talking about how they're bummed they're missing
Their kids' soccer game.
The soccer game.
And I think that's the
Yes.
first time I realized they were real people, because I'd been going for years to see them as rock stars on stage, and then I'm like, oh, you do forget that they have those human emotions. And
Yep,
so.
absolutely. Some of my favorite people that I met on the road are, like the techs, like Charlie Watts. His tech, his name is Don McCauley, and he's just like this greatest guy, and like the whole tech crew, and then they eat craft services together, and they talk just like any other group of dudes at work. I mean, they're just at work, and then that's the same thing for the Stones. They're at work, I mean, that's what, and they literally have to think of it that way at this point, because they've been doing it for so
Right.
long. But like, and it's just, it is an interesting thing, because we just sort of, as fans of something, they end up meaning so much to you because of a lyric or a certain song that you heard, and it brings you back to a certain place and time in your life, and that's super important. But I also think that it'll be good for us as a society to place maybe just a little less value on that person outside of that moment, that they provided to you. And imagine if that we could think of that person who provided that moment, that emotional experience with that song, as just a human. I think we'd probably be better off. They'd be better off, because honestly, it's not fun to be famous, I don't think. I think it's really hard. I think it seems fun at first, and then people really have a rough time. It gets confusing, I think, for a lot of people. And I think it'd be better for us, because then maybe we wouldn't want to be famous too. And I feel like that's like a syndrome we have right now. Everybody wants to be a little famous, and like it's interesting. I don't know. I don't mean to downplay any of it. It's all awesome stuff, but human is human,
And that's what's so been fun doing this podcast, is learning about a lot of people that I like run into in the grocery store, but I didn't know they were from, not, what is it, Galt?
Galt, very
Galt,
good, yeah.
Missouri.
All right, that's
Did I get it right?
Galt, Missouri.
There we
yes.
go. So, like, I'd never have known that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that to me is super fun.
it's a dimension.
Yeah, just learning stuff about people. I find so interesting.
Yeah.
Because everybody's got such different experiences, whether it's personally, professionally, growing up, or being adult, or any of that stuff.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
I find it really fun just to learn about, well, how was that? Oh, well, let me tell you. And then you go through it.
Yeah.
Reminds me of this one time I was, fell out of a tree or something stupid like
Right.
that. I just find it so fun.
That's great.
Where were we now, even in your, did we even get to, like, how you started True Facade? Like, I think we did that, like, growing up, and so you got here. Like, so explain to me a little bit more about, like, the we talked about creative process. We talked about through, your kind of business shutting down and then starting back up. And I think we talked a little bit about the video with the empty hearts.
Yes, empty hearts. Yep.
And how that was, you had mentioned something that I thought was really interesting, because you're talking about people that are successful. You said, I didn't get paid a ton to do that, but that wasn't the point.
Right.
That's what I also find interesting about people that are successful, is they're not there for the money. They're there because they either enjoy what they do, They love the creative process. And like you had talked about, your value wasn't monetary. It was learning about how authentic these people were and how they stayed humble and grounded. And they continued to love what they started doing in the first place and continued their craft. And that's why they were still doing it.
Yeah.
Isn't that fun to learn from people like that?
Yeah, it is. Yep. And money's a part of life, and if you own a business, you've got to make it profitable. Otherwise, you can hurt yourself. And that was an experience I had to learn. At first, towards the beginning, I felt like, it's gonna just if I just keep reinvesting and living fast and hard, that's a lesson that I learned as an entrepreneur, that you've got to become measured and you do have to reach your bottom dollar. But I think, it's, for me, it was an adjustment to that point, making sure that I'm smart enough with the financial side of things versus, being after it for the money. I mean, I feel like I needed to go the other direction because there's so much passion behind pretty much everything I've done. It was like, okay, don't hurt yourself, Make sure you're not just doing it for the passion. That was an arc. But I think that there was an interesting experience I had with this towards the beginning of producing this documentary, which is on a photographer named Rob Shanahan. Towards the beginning of the process, I knew we had a story, and I knew we could reach the people that we needed to tell the story. But there was this part of the process where I was like, we've got to get a ton of money to do this, right? And that's going to be, and we're going to be able to, because we got these names attached to it. And so I'm going to spend a ton of time going after that money. And that ended up being the wrong mindset. Eventually what ended up happening was, we kind of adjusted what we wanted, where, how we were going to approach the process, and try to pay attention, more about the moment and the performance of what we were doing. And then eventually that other aspect fixed itself, but it's such an interesting, what your goal is really affects how you're going to do, and if your goal is to get money, but that's not actually what's going to make your film work, then you're going to miss things.
Yep.
And this has been, this is a decision I made. I'm going to be an artistic entrepreneur. I'm not going to buy a cornfield, get a loan, build a commercial building, and then that's a good way to make money. That's going to be a goal, right? And it's like, you're really passionate about the cornfield or the building. I mean, some people really love their architectural work and stuff, but you know what I mean? There's a different, for me, the goal in my work is the experience of the work, and you absolutely must pay yourself. Otherwise you're screwed.
Right.
But if it's the goal, and it's just interesting for this, when the mindset was on the money, things weren't working out as well. When that shifted, then what needed to happen happened. You know what I mean? And so that's just part of, I think, one of the things about entrepreneurship is that, for, at least for me and what I do, which is creative, it's a completely creative business, and entertainment is a completely creative business. Trusting that you'll get what you need if you pay attention to the right areas of what you're doing is an important part of it.
I had a mentor tell me very early on, he said, focus on bringing value to people, and compensation takes care of itself.
That's it. That's the perfect way of saying what I just tried to say in
that has
12
been,
minutes.
I have not found, there's been a few things that he told me, but that has been one of the most true things I have ever figured out in my entire life.
Absolutely.
If you just focus on bringing value to people, compensation takes care of itself.
Yep.
And anything that I've ever done, if it's friendship, if it's business, if it's any type of relationship, if it's anything, kids, wives,
absolutely,
whatever.
Yeah, it works for it all. I mean, that's a great phrase.
Yeah. So that's something that I learned a long time ago. Thank God I did.
Yeah.
At that time, he told me that, I'm like on starvation mode. Like, I had a computer that I, couldn't afford, but had to buy an office that I couldn't afford, a phone, and a new baby, a wife, a dog, and a mortgage. And I was like, okay, figure it out. I'm like, all right, well,
Yep.
dive off the cliff.
Yep.
And we'll go.
Yep.
And I think it was 3 months in, had made $0.
Oh,
I'm like,
gosh.
great. This is
Those are tough
going
times.
good.
It's hard to be zen about compensational workout.
He's
for
like,
yourself
yeah,
when you don't
provide
know.
value to people. I'm like, how about you shut up and go home?
Yeah. Do you have any money?
Yeah. You're like, what's wrong with you? You're stacked. Like, yeah, you can think that when you're, but
Right. It's easy to say that.
he told me that, and
Yeah.
I took.
No, it's super true, and it's also for yourself, because if you're like after something that you don't love, which nobody really loves money, right? You can love certain things, that the freedom and things that it can give to you, but if you're not, if you're after something that, and especially for me personally, I'm not interested in wealth. It's not. I consider I value many other things way ahead of that, and I got to say that comes from a certain level of privilege. My wife has an awesome job, and her job has health insurance, so I don't want to I don't want to be like blithe about it, but my point is that if you're after something that's not the thing you should be after, other things really do start to fall apart. And that was, the beautiful thing about being brave enough, free enough to try the entrepreneurial approach to life is that you do find that those lessons stick.
Yeah.
They really stick, because they end up having a lot at stake. You know what I mean? And so, like, this was an interesting time where I was having there was a lot of business going on for like True Facade marketing stuff, and this film opportunity came at the same time. So I'm good still, right here. Thank you. At the same time. So there was a lot of juggling, and like honestly, like we probably mismanaged some of our time trying to keep this afloat, make sure it's still going, and then still reach for the stars. Shoot for the stars with this other thing, and it was definitely the best learning experience that I had. Those hard times was the best learning experience I had about maintaining balance and not overextending yourself and allowing things to happen when they're going to happen, and trying to do that thing where you're going to react well, but you're not trying to force anything. I feel like I'm still sort of sorting it out, actually, partly, but I know one thing, that I'll be from here on out in my life, I'll be paying more attention to what I can do, my performance in the day, than what my goal is, and you still have to have your goals outlined, but it's you can't get there. You can't get there without doing this right. And so if your mind is there, this can get all jumbled and screwed up.
Will Smith says that really well. He talks about how he and his brother had to build this wall for his dad out of cinder blocks or whatever it was. And his dad taught him, he goes, don't think about the wall. Just think about taking that block and laying it as perfect as you can lay that block, and then move on. And he talks about how he's done that in his career. There's a YouTube video that at some point I'd like to share with all of humanity.
Yeah,
because it's so amazing, some of the things that he says. But that's one of the pieces in there, is he talks about that, and that I think is a little bit of what you're saying. It's
that's
like,
exactly it.
I'm just going to take this day, this hour, this meeting, this opportunity, and just focus on that. And then next thing, whatever, I'll figure that out. But I'm just going to focus on that. I think there's a lot of value in that. Because it's so easy to get overwhelmed with, oh my gosh, I got this on this day and this day, and you're going all over the place. I think that's hard. It's a hard spot to live in. It's just so chaotic.
Absolutely.
And I was on a project with you and Michael. This is maybe 4 or 5 years ago. We were in a small dress shop in the very small town of Easton, Minnesota. And you two were like kids in a candy store with your equipment.
It's a great dress shop.
It is.
Yeah.
But I remember sitting back watching you and Michael with you'd gotten some new piece of equipment. But you guys were like giddy and, like giggling and happy that you could use it, And I said at the time, I'm like, you guys are living your passion, aren't you? And you're like, yeah.
We have, you
Yeah.
know, and Michael's my best friend, and we've been able to do a lot of this work together, and we have enjoyed it. We have enjoyed our time and our days together. And we have always enjoyed, you know, a new piece of equipment, or honestly, like the first time you sit down to edit an interview that you just did, it was really fun to do. I mean, you've got to have that love for what you're doing, if you want to get as much as we wanted to get out of it. You know what I
Right.
mean? So and for you know, for me, and I don't want to speak for Michael, but I know it's true. You know, our love is story, and there's story in everything. So it's like you can kind of put your love in anything you want. You know, if your love is that, like sort of all encompassing, you know, it's the story that gets us. And there's a story in that dress shop, and there's a story backstage at a Stones concert, and in a lot of ways they're the same thing.
Yeah.
You know.
You talk about that because I copied and pasted your bio
Ah.
for the episode, and you talk about storytelling, your
Yeah.
love for storytelling.
Yep.
And I think that's a fun thing to do because you're right. There's a story behind everything. That is so fun. So, tell me a little bit about you talked about some home runs that you were trying to hit, and national, all of that. So, how do you go from Easton Dress Shop to talking with people that, from a music standpoint, would be, I mean, that would just be a dream for a lot of people to be able to sit in that chair. Like, how does that transition work?
Sure. So, you know, I had a studio downtown, was across from Pub 500, and I was doing connecting with the music department, which is in the same building as the theater department. So I know the professors up there, and one of the professors in the music industry department, her name is Tanya Butler. She's this amazing person. She's actually like running the music program at Berkeley right now, or the music industry program at Berkeley right now. One of the most fantastic people I ever met. And, you know, just throwing anything at the wall, you know, was really the mentality of True Facade for a long time. And this was one of those things where, you know, I thought we could add some value to the students at MSU and create an opportunity for people downtown with music in the industry. And so they came. I brought a certain class in for the semester, or it was for the year, but to do a program where they were going to put on a musical event at the studio. And so one of the events that took place there was a keynote speech by a photographer. His name is Rob Shanahan, and he's from Norwood, Minnesota. So he's a Minnesota native. Now lives out in LA, and you know, his story is really cool too. I mean, he drove out there with a love for drumming and a love for photography, and you know, started working with certain magazines and got to shoot one kind of big musician, and it moved up and up and up. You know, it's a really cool story for him too. And eventually he ended up being a photographer on tour with Ringo Starr in the All-Star Band. So, and he's got a book out, and he's, you know, he's been completely successful with his passion of music and photography. And he came, and we ended up so cool because he has these huge photographs, you know, like canvases, you know, of people like Sheila E. and you know, what were some of the other ones that we had up there? You know, I can't remember the ones that we had up there, but we had the whole room full of his awesome photography. And you know, Keith Richards was one of them, and then he did his keynote. And so this happened because, you know, I talk about how we caught this guy with a net, in a sense, because I was just lots of energy put out there for any possibility to happen. You know, anything can happen. Let's do it all. I had a ton of energy back then. I had a little kid, and it was just tons and tons of energy. And so he came, and I said to him, you know, before you go back, can we do an interview? And he was like, yeah, let's do an interview. And then he said, well, actually, you know, it would be cool. Why don't you come to my hometown, and I'll show you around my hometown, which is Norwood. And so I canceled everything for the next day or 2 days later or whatever before he left, and I got a crew of a couple of kids. Some of them were from MSU, and it was Michael, my friend and partner Michael, and a couple of MSU, interns. And we went out there, and we shot him around his, the little coffee shop, and we went to his old house, and it was just a really fun day, and I was interviewing him all day long. It's like, how did you get here, and what was it like to shoot with Ringo, and how did you take this picture? And it was just on and on and on. It was just super, super fun. And then we had all this footage. We had probably 15 projects that we had to get done, with deadlines, marketing, things like that. Eventually, on free time, I ended up cutting this little 5-minute mini documentary together, and that would have been like in October that we did that shoot. By April, I had finished this thing, and Michael and I had planned to take a trip to out to LA anyway, and I wanted to do this trip, and we weren't sure, and I was like, then this gave me a reason to really go out there.
What year was this?
This was 2017, April of 2017.
Okay.
So we drove out to LA, sort of under the guise that we wanted to go hang out there and see my friend's new baby, and but really we want to bring this video to this guy, because if we did that, it would shock him, surprise him, and and so we did, and we drove out over the Rocky Mountains and landed in LA, and I called the guy and said, "Hey, we're in LA. We got a thing we want to show you." And we brought it to him, and we showed him the little documentary, and he loved it. And I said, "Well, I'm glad you really like it, because what do you think about, trying to produce a film about your photography career, about your experience as a drummer and a photographer?" And he was all for it. And so we, it's just, and then of course we had to figure out, well, how the heck do you produce a documentary?
Yeah.
And so, and there was a lot of learning curves with that, a lot of ups and downs. We ended up in a position right before COVID where we were talking with some people who were very interested in purchasing what we had and getting it to that point of distribution. So I'm feeling confident once things, start to get back to normal in the entertainment industry. I do think it was a setback, but not one that matters. I think, and then of course, the beauty of having done this project is that we ended up doing through this project is when we started interviewing people, on the sort of the lower hanging fruit from his catalog. And what was really fun about the project was doing that in order to get the next guy.
Yeah.
And so one of the greatest parts of the process was we did an interview with a guy named Steve Gadd, who is one of the most famous drummers within the music industry. Everybody in the industry knows him. He's like a hired gun, but he's worked with Paul Simon, and he's worked with James Taylor, and he invented the drum lick for 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover,
Wow.
And he is steadfast killer drummer. Everybody knows he's one of the best.
Yeah.
But you don't know his name.
Yeah.
Right? But another amazing industry guy knows his name, and his name is Hal Blaine, and he played on every song you ever heard from the 60s. He was the radio drummer. I mean, they were called the Wrecking Crew, and they played Mamas and the Papas and the Beach Boys and Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel. Everybody, Nancy Sinatra, everybody who had an American folk rock record in the 60s, they came to that studio, and he was the drummer on the record because he was just better than the band's drummer.
Yeah.
The band's drummer did it on tour, he did it on the record or on the album.
Yeah.
Well, it just so happens that one of Charlie Watts from the Rolling Stones' favorite drummer on earth is Hal Blaine.
Wow.
And so, because Charlie's idol worked with us and we have this great video we can show him, we ended up there.
Yeah.
And so that process was really, really fun. And, some of the business side was a little bit harder. We've been figuring it out. Just like anything, just like I did here, with figuring out how to run a marketing company. You cannot go straight up.
Yeah.
You cannot know what to expect. But you do this and you do that well enough, and eventually you get there. And that project led to working with the Empty Hearts, and now I'm going to be producing a documentary for them.
Yeah.
And that
So
just
cool.
sort of got underway just recently. So, and so now what I think is super important in life now, right, is to not, let your guard down on any of this stuff that you've had the opportunity to do and to create, and to, we still want to produce marketing content right here in Mankato for companies who need it, and figuring out how to do that, without detracting from the potential of producing another film. And so it's like, and all of this, you get this major halt in all of everything. And like, it's been difficult to not be on the move, but it's also been super great to be reflective.
Yes.
And that's what COVID has provided for me personally, is wow, all the, I just did. And you and then you end up with result after result after result. Like I didn't even mention the Chrome Hunters project, right? Which is a whole other thing, which is an awesome TV pilot that we created for Unique Specialty and Classics. Those guys were so awesome. They're a local, classic car dealership. I think we'll sell that eventually too, but it's like there was so much doing. And then all of a sudden we've had this halt, and it's been actually, I think, really great. And like, I've been able to sort of figure out how we can move forward, where, at certain things we're like, I don't think we can do all of this, but I think that, there, with that sort of mindset of saying things will happen when they need to happen, compensation will occur when when necessary, like you say, and just keep focusing on doing your best work and doing the right thing and doing the thing that matters most to you, and continuing to engage in your passion, and be authentic and real. I think that it'll all come to fruition how it needs to, and even COVID won't mess it up.
One thing I want to come back to is, you had talked about going out to L.A., and I forget the gentleman's name that you're going to bring the short documentary to.
Yeah, the photographer Rob Shanahan. Yep.
So you're bringing this to Rob. He doesn't know you're coming.
Right.
Like, when you took off, he didn't know you were coming.
No.
So a couple of things what I find interesting about entrepreneurs is, one, they're just doers. They just like do it. So when you're driving out there, explain to me, like, you had to have mentally thought there's two outcomes, or maybe three outcomes. One is he completely won't take your call, won't talk to you, whatever, and you just drive back, tail between your legs, like, that sucked, didn't work.
Yep.
Two is you, like, maybe meet him and he's like, oh yeah, we'll see. Or three is everything went awesome.
Yeah.
And what happened? Like,
Yep.
Explain to me your mental process of driving out there, because that's a lot of reflection time to think about, is this going to go the right way, wrong way, or sideways? Tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, one of the principles that I have tried to operate on is that if you're going to do something, there should be at least two different good reasons why you're going to do it. And that, and the more good reasons why you're going to do something, the more likely it is to be a success. And one of the reasons to go out there and do that, it is to find out whether or not something like this can happen, And so just by knowing that there's going to be a learning experience here that's going to shed some sort of value on my life and provide me with something new, some new understanding moving forward. To me, I got to that point knowing that would be enough to make it worth it. And then from there, the rest is icing on the cake. And I feel like that process has been part of diving into the deep end many, many times. Like, just knowing that even if you want this thing to work out in a certain way, if it doesn't, is there value anyhow? And that's kind of like your mindset that decides that, you know? So like it would be a really bad, I think it would be a really bad headspace to go, if this doesn't work, I'm ruined, you know?
Right,
Like
right.
this, I feel like that would have made it way less likely for it to have panned out.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so I didn't think about it that way at all. I thought about it as, let's go have an experience first of all. It was a totally awesome experience. I did get to see my best friend from high school and his new kid. So, worst comes to worst, it was just to go out to LA and, go to an old movie theater and hang out in the Hollywood Hills and see my best friend.
Yep.
But you get to that point and there's absolutely no reason not to take the risk.
Yep.
Right? If you're like, by taking this risk, if I fall on my ass, the experience is worth it, then it doesn't really hurt to take the risk.
That's so awesome.
I'm glad my podcast came before yours because this is going to be hard to follow.
Yeah, whoever the guest is next.
Yeah, it's like,
Well, it's a great question, and it's not even like an intellectual thing that I think about a ton.
Correct.
But it's just, I think that's it. I think, dude, we have such little control ultimately.
Yes.
On what happens, around us, and that's kind of a fallacy, really, that we can, and it's something that I've felt really strongly about how I can manifest my own future, and I've had that experience, and I've had that feeling before, and actually, there's been some moments in my life where it was true, but that's a 50-50 thing.
Yeah.
And so if you choose to decide that it doesn't matter whether or not your intention is the outcome, but you're going to get something out of it anyway, then you just don't have that worry. There's not that failure really there to experience.
I think that's so interesting because that's along the same lines of how I'll often make a decision on things.
Sure.
I'll sit and think, I'm like, okay, so what's the best opportunity outcome? Like, what's the best way this could go? What's the worst way this could go? And if I can live with the worst way, I dive off the cliff every single time.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, okay, well, I would really not like that. That'd be kind of sucky, and that'd be dumb. But could I live with it? Yeah. Is it going to break my business? Is it going to break my family? Is it going to ruin relationships? If it's going to do that, then no. But if it's going to, it'll be okay. Then yeah, I'm going to jump off the cliff every time.
And then you harken back to that idea that you learn more from a failure.
Yep.
And then that value is there no matter what. Mm-hmm. Right?
That is so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun.
So out of respect also to Lisa having to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
yeah.
Indeed.
Tomorrow morning.
Early bird.
So I want to say a couple things. One is a huge thanks, Lisa, for coming in and being a co-host.
It was my pleasure.
Because we're in probably, an hour and a half or so. But this has been maybe, I think, and I can't even say, I can't say this now because
you can say it in
a
front of me. Go
previous
ahead.
guest. This has been super fun.
It's been great. It's been really great.
It's great. And what you're doing here with this program is great. And hopefully it gets better every time.
Yeah.
It's really cool. I think asking people to come and just be willing to share ideas in a room is an awesome thing to do. So thanks for having me. It's really cool to be here.
Well, this is, having never met you, I have 1,000 more questions.
Well, anytime.
You two are kindred spirits. I'm picking that up over here.
Yeah,
So,
and I would love, if it's okay, for you to come back
Please.
at some point. We're going to have Lisa back again, and we're going to have her go through and talk about some of the other Rick Springfield conversations that she's had.
Absolutely.
Or maybe some of or maybe the things at the concerts. That would be maybe more interesting. But
top secret.
Yeah, top secret. Yeah, what was going on in 1971? We'll talk about that. But I have super enjoyed this.
Yeah,
Thank you very
likewise.
much. Is there? So you talked about a new documentary possibly that you have going on. There's your camera. So if you want to talk about any of the stuff you have going on or whatever.
Well, I think we're gonna continue to push everything that we've built forward. With True Facade, and one of those things I hope. It started, so we're, I think, going to have the chance to continue moving in the direction of producing yet a second film, which with these Empty Hearts guys, which is amazing because we're going to get to look back into their worlds of working with the Cars and Blondie, and it would just be a really fantastic story, and started that editing process. And at the same time, we're going to be ready for Mankato and Minnesota to open back up again, to start telling their stories and inviting people back into their worlds and their business opportunities. And that's something that we are never going to let go of. And so, it's all about, for me, it's about making sure that whatever's been built, it doesn't get left behind, and you keep leaving room for new opportunities. And each day, do your best to make them all work out. And some of them will, some of them won't, but we'll always be here trying. So
Learn along the way.
yeah, absolutely.
Lisa, do you have anything to say?
Okay, at the end of mine, I said, go Mavs.
Go
That was
Mavs.
my shot. That was my parting. He just said that, and I said, go Mavs. Can I redo my podcast?
No,
Put it right there.
you're too
I'll
awesome.
edit it right out. You can just do whatever you want. We'll just quick cut. Be like, I know she's wearing something different and whatever. She's in a different spot in the room.
Seriously, I'm like, shoot, I shouldn't have been so like fangirly. I should have been
Yeah,
more
well, now
deep
you're
in
back.
my
Now you're guest hosting, so you must have done something right. I mean, come on.
I was super excited when you decided. I'm like, who can I have guest host?
She's
And I
the
thought,
best.
First thing, I'm like, okay, I got to talk to Lisa because she's good at this game. But anyway, so thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for this.
Yes, so only the people that have been on, and like maybe one or two others, but if you find a beer fridge or you find a car driving by that has the Soman podcast, you know that person is
Part of the family.
seriously legit.
Cool.
So again, thank you very much. Lisa, thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
Awesome.